Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm George Moss again here at allpointstv.com and also WFOV 92.1. We're very glad to have you with us again today, here Monday. And we are going to be doing another hour program, and hope you'll stay tuned for the next hour as we begin to talk about some of the topics at hand. I want to thank the listening audience for staying with us. We've had a couple of our viewers that have been with us ever since we started the program some years ago, and we're very glad to have you still tuning us in. Hope you will tell your friends about the program and that you will try to make us a better studio as we're trying to bring some quality programming to you. Our job is to try to do something different than what is being done at the other networks, because if all we are doing is repeating what they're doing, then there's really no purpose for us to be in existence here. I want to, of course, give a thanks to Mr. Paul Herring over there at WFOV 92.1. And Paul, I want to commend you for the fine job you're doing over there, because your studio makes us better because we understand the quality that you're doing over there. And we're trying to stay up to the level in which you would expect us to stay up to here at our studio at allpointstv.com. And if we are doing half the job you're doing, then we are pretty well on the road to becoming a better network ourselves. We're working a lot of the kinks out. And one of the things we're doing in the studio here is we're beginning to put more cameras in, and we're getting more sophisticated equipment so that we can do some of the camera adjustments as the program is being taped, can do different camera angles and so many different capabilities we're putting in the studio right now. So stay tuned as we begin to increase the technology in the studio. And we have some of the cameras here right now that is really amazing what the studio is in fact doing. I can remember when I first started with WFOV and with our studio, allpointstv.com. I can remember when we first started, and we'd have guests come in, and they thought they were actually talking just through a more or less of a radio feed. And I would tell them at the end of the program, I said, I want to thank you for coming in, and we will we can watch the program later on. And I'll tell them where we're going to be able to find it. And they would say, you mean it was taped on a visual? Because they could hardly see the camera, because we had one of those we had one of those small cameras. And when they saw the camera over there, they couldn't believe that was what was taping the program. They thought it was an audio. And when they found it was another feed as well, we had an audio feed, but it was also a visual feed. And when they found it out, they couldn't believe it, because they couldn't believe that camera at that time, very small as it was picking up the program and then, ushering it out to the camera feed on YouTube and other networks. And now we got all these cameras in here. It's just amazing how much growth we've done over the last 8 years or so. And I'm real proud of the technicians here that make this program possible. We sit here in front of the camera, but don't ever think that we are the ones that's making this program really work. So many persons are involved in the efforts to make this happen, and I do not want to overlook their contribution, because without them doing their job, we can't do our job here either. I want to talk about a few things before we get started with the main topic today, and that is some of the things that just broke today on the news. You might have come across in Virginia. John, I don't know if you saw this or not. In Virginia, where the legislative body backed down from their beginning to try to bring about a ban on constitutional weapons. I mean, we have the right to bear arms, and the Constitution is very clear about that in terms of Amendment 2, where it says the right to bear arms shall not, that means it's a command, shall not be abridged. And every time you look up, these politicians are trying to abridge it like that language does not exist in the Second Amendment. But that's the disrespect they show for the founding documents of the country. They don't have respect for the framers and what the framers said in their foundational documents, either the Constitution or the preceding document, the Declaration of Independence, which says you have the right to life, which is in the second paragraph. Maybe they didn't get past the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence, where it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, natural rights, the rights you're born with. And then they began to enumerate what those rights are: the rights to life, and then the right to liberty, and then the right to pursue your own dreams, which they said the right to pursue happiness. And they act like we are supposed to get our happiness from them bequeathing our happiness to us. I mean, I can't think of anything more comical than that. We don't get our happiness from the government. John, the government's gonna make us happy by ensuring that our money is taken from us to ensure the greatest good for the greatest number, and they're gonna do it by putting a gun at us.
Did you hear where the Democrats in Congress, in D.C., wanted to give themselves a quote unquote modest $4,500 increase in their salaries? Gee, $4,500. That's a modest. That's like they make what, 180,000, 170, 185,000,
174,000.
Yeah,
Plus their benefits. Their fringe package drives up the cost of each one of those members of Congress, and there are 535 of these jokers. And when you add their fringe package, the cost to the taxpayers is about $300,000 a year, because they have a lucrative, retirement package.
Plus whatever they can get from...
And then the vacation, which is vacation when they're sitting down there in the Congress. I consider them to be on vacation when they're sitting up there in Washington.
Don't forget all the money they can get from different people, from different sources, through different PACs, and hide the money they're getting. Because you notice, like, Nancy Pelosi's worth like $70 to $100 million estimates. Where'd she get that money at?
They're becoming millionaires.
Where'd she get that money from?
John, 50% of the people in the Congress are millionaires, and that can only mean one of two things. One, and which one of these two do you believe? One is, since 50% of them are millionaires, and only 1% of the people out here where we are millionaires, it either means one or the other. Either they are 50 times smarter than the average person in the American domain, the habitat of America, or they have their hand in the cookie jar. And the cookie jar is the federal treasury, the $4 trillion that we in fact give them at gunpoint every year, and the $18 trillion economy that we're running right now, and it's really churning very well because of the leadership we have, where Donald Trump did something that was ingenious, which was something that was determined by the framers in terms of their implication of capitalism. It wasn't explicitly stated in the Constitution, but it's really an implication when you have the idea of a small government, meaning it's not intruding into all of these different spaces and these crevices and canvases of the political landscape and the economic landscape of the country, and they're just all over the place right now. That was not intended. So the implications of the small government that was intended by the framers is an implication of capitalism, because government control is not capitalism. Government control is socialism. And I don't care how Bernie Sanders tries to spin it, that's what it is. This idea you can put the word democratic in front of it is political nonsense. There's nothing democratic about socialism. Socialism is a state. But we have this aggrandizement of the government to such a large extent that many people believe. It's like you ask people, where does food come from? They say the store. So when you ask them, where do our rights come from? And they, I guess most of them would say that our rights come from the government, as if the government is a liberty-bestowing institution. And as if that's ever happened in the history of the world, where the government has bestowed in the liberty. If you can find, I tell you what I would challenge you to do. If you can find a single place in history, in any country on the planet, from the beginning of humankind to the present time, and you can find at any point where government has bestowed liberty on any people. Could you please send it to me? Put it in if you can't send me a telegram, we don't have telegrams anymore. As that one song said, put a message in a bowl and send a message in a bowl, baby, and just send it to me where I can get it, where that occurred in history, because I can tell you right now, if you're looking for it, I can save you some library time because you're not going to be able to find it. Governments don't bestow liberty. Government extracts liberty. You had liberty when you were in a natural state. And that's what Thomas Jefferson was writing about when he said you have certain unalienable rights that preclude the establishment of government, and then those rights you bring in the aftermath of the establishment of government is those rights that governments are instituted supposedly by the people to maintain those rights, those natural rights. And they named them and said what they were, and how many governments you see actually maintaining those, including the government here in the United States.
I'd like to know this. I'm corresponding, posting stuff against the Bernieites, the Bernie Sanders supporters. Mm-hmm. And they think the government's so good at doing stuff, they want to hand over their health care to them. Well, I live in Flint, Michigan. We went through, 5.5, 6 years of not having potable water. Okay? Mm-hmm. And that's a government entity run at all levels of governmental interference or control. And yet they poisoned our water system. Yeah, you can sue them, but you're suing taxpayers for ineptness and the lassitude of these other people. So why would anybody see this going on here and see what they brought up with here, want to hand a government over more of their control of their lives? Why would you want to do that?
It is a matter of, as you're pointing out, is a matter of insanity. Government has never fixed anything because there are only political choices in government. And when you have political choices made in government, all you have is trade-offs. It's like those medical commercials. When you have, if you watch those commercials, they'll say that if you take this medicine, now you have this illness and you're taking it for that particular illness. But it will say so calmly, and you're not listening to it because they got the visual up. And they understand that a picture is worth 1,000 words, so the words going, you're not even listening to the words, you're watching the pictures. And they got people cooking. So that's a way of appealing to some of the senses there, the sense of taste. And what they do is they paralyze the other senses by the sight, using other senses. The sight, the idea of the taste, and things like that. And then when you listen in the audio, you have the sense of hearing, and when you cancel out the hearing because you are working on those other senses, then you don't even hear the message. And they're telling you that if you take this, and then it creates that. And so there are some unintended things that occur in it. Well, it's not always unintended if they can tell you that it will cause this, that, and other. And they even say, and it says so calmly, and it may even cause death. And I don't think I want to be taking a whole lot of stuff that I'm trying to cure an illness, which is going to help me stay around, and then telling me that what I'm going to take for the illness is that which is going to kill me. Because I'm not trying to get killed. That's why I'm taking the medicine. But if the medicine's going to kill me, why am I taking the medicine? I mean, that is, government's like that too. So government asks you to take the medicine, right? And they want you to take the medicine by telling you the government is going to come in a fell swoop from the top, and they're going to solve the problem of health care. And there's a bum up their line. You can keep your doctor, you can keep your insurance, and people were surprised when they found he was lying. I mean, how much more do they have to say to us before we find out that they lie? That's how they get elected. And then after getting elected, you think they're going to stop lying? No, because they got to be reelected. And if they stop lying at the point that they got elected, they can't get reelected if they stop. So then they have to up the ante next time, and more of our money is being taken at gunpoint, and I guess, and they're gonna make us charitable. And here's Obama telling us, this is totally insane, that we're gonna give everybody some type of medical help by the federal government. They're so benevolent up there, and they love us so much. They're not taking any of our freedom from us, so they're just trying to be benevolent. And Joe the plumber, you out there trying to raise a question about whether or not this is more government largesse and they're taking more of the control over the American people's lives. And Obama's telling you that it's a charitable thing to do as if it's coming out of his pocket. It's a charitable thing to do, Joe. You couldn't understand that this is charity. Charity is what I did yesterday, when I took some money out of my pocket and I voluntarily gave it in the basket that they pass around. Nobody was holding a gun to my head. I have to tell you, I didn't give 10%. Now, I have to be honest. And I don't like giving 10% when I go to the store either, but now they got this thing up there where you go to the kiosk and they ask you, here's a tip, and they don't even start at 10%. They start at 15, 18, and 20. I guess they'd be asking for 50% if they smile a couple of times at your table. You know, but the point I'm trying to make here is that this idea of government being about the business of philanthropy, how much more history do we need to have of how government operates before we get over the idea that anything is benevolent about government? Government is a liberty-taking institution. And this idea they're not grabbing before they give is to preclude the fact that government doesn't have any way of creating any wealth for itself. I mean, let's say, you know, what the framers had intended for the federal government, because they did not intend for the federal government to have what is in the 16th Amendment. That wasn't intended. The federal tax amendment in 1913, when they abrogated what's in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, when they abrogated that and then gave the right to have the federal government go directly into our pockets, bypassing the states into the pockets of the taxpayers over the boundaries of the states, that was not intended by the framers, because they understood the danger of having something that distant from the people being able to get into the pockets of the people. And so the tax was on the states, which had to be taxed proportionally. And that proportional taxation, by the way, was one reason why the South picked up its arms and began to fight against the government, because they understood that the proportional representation in terms of the taxation was not equal. What the South was doing was paying for the prosperity of the North, and they objected to it. And when they were not stopped by the South complaining about it in 1828, by the Tariff of Abomination, again in 1832, when they continued to complain, 30 years of that and not being heard by Washington, because why would they be listening to us when they think that they have to, in fact, we have to, in fact, listen to their voice, because they have the military arms to stop us from objecting to it. The South then appealed to the Second Amendment, which they have hated ever since. And in Virginia, I'm not surprised that this man is doing what he's doing. I'm not surprised that the legislative branch backed down either, because of the history of Virginia. That's where the Confederacy was. But this idea that they have the right to our pocketbook, they actually believe that in Washington. They believe they're being benevolent and taking our money and then distributing in their name where they can get reelected. They think that's a benevolent act on their part. This is how crazy they are. And if you believe that anything they're doing right now is designed to do anything other than enrich the powerful and to restore power to those that are now willing it as incumbents, and when they run again for re-election, they're running as a way of pursuing power for re-election. If you think there's anything beyond that, you're not really paying attention. And this idea they're going to actually solve problems, let's understand that when you are applying a remedy to one part of a a political apparatus and you're applying a solution to it, it has the same effects as when you're applying medicine to a remedy inside somebody's body. That is, say, it's a remedy to that particular problem. But in remedying that problem, it then creates some other problems that was not a problem before the remedy was applied to it. And the same thing happens in government. Government can't solve any problems. It can only begin to do trade-offs of one situation for another situation, and it will always create another situation in its place because it doesn't have the resources just to apply to the problem enough resources. Because in economics, economics is the study of how to distribute resources that are in fact limited, and how do you in fact congregate the limitation of the resource base to the problems that are in fact massive, but the resources are not massive. So how do you then accommodate one problem when there are multiple problems that have to be resolved? And you cannot do that because you don't have all of the resources to in fact do it. So you then have to rob Peter to pay Paul. And that's what government does. When they talk about they're going to resolve something, you can forget that. Government does not resolve problems. Government creates problems. And when Obama was up there telling us, as if we didn't already have a history of all these lies these politicians tell us, when Obama was telling us that you can keep your doctor and your insurance is going to go down by 25%, I was marveling over how this man could twist his mouth. I guess it wasn't twist his mouth. See, that came right out of he wasn't talking out. It wasn't like he was saying he wasn't parsing his lips and then twisting his mouth to one side or another. He was saying it right directly into the camera and talking to us directly, looking right into the camera, right into our eyes, as if he should not have been ashamed of saying, which is absurd. You have medical costs, and then you're going to add a layer of bureaucratic costs on top of the medical costs, and the costs are going to go down. How is that even possible? And how does a man even say that? You know what I thought when I was hearing that? I was saying to myself, who is this talking? Because although I already knew, I knew it was talking. Now I'll tell you who's talking whenever they talk. Whenever these politicians are talking, I'm going to tell you who you're listening to. You are, write this down, you're listening to Attila. When Obama was saying, let's listen to this carefully. When Obama was saying, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. If you like your insurance, you can keep your insurance. Well, thank you, Gotti. Thank you, Godfather. If I like it, then I can keep it. Because of why? Because the benevolent Godfather is telling me that he's going to let me keep what I have. Because they're so benevolent. I knew he was lying when he said that. Because you cannot, in fact, keep the independence when they have to manage the resource, which is the money supply. Well, not the money supply. We don't have any money in the. That's another thing. We don't have any money in our system. We only have debt. I was writing about that the other day on my Facebook post. I was saying that the deep state and the state are Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. One is the one out in public, and then the deep state is the one that has the disguise on, but it's the same folks. One just publicly out there smiling in your face. The other one is the one that's cloaked that's cloaked in the shadows, and they both working from the same vantage point. They really are the same people. They are the Clark Kent and the Superman. They are Bruce Wayne and Batman, and they are this guy. And then Spider. See, it's the same. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And they're all the same folks, just one mass, one person in this dispensation of his personage, and then in another dimension, I guess they drink. I don't know what they're drinking up there, what kind of serum, but somebody must be drinking something up there. for what they're talking about and what they're telling us. But it doesn't have any, they don't have any solutions. That's what I'm saying. There are no solutions in the political arena because there are no resources there. Before government can dispense anything that it helps anybody, they must first of all take. And that taking then limits the amount of decisions that go on inside the economy, where 300 million potential consumers can dictate from the wisdom of the numbers the production. And if they all buy into it, the production will in fact increase, because there are all these consumers making the decisions about what's produced by their demand for it. But when you take that out of the economy, what you have is government making demand. So a single entity for 300 million people. Okay, John's telling me we have to take a break. And I want to thank you for staying with us for the first 26 minutes, those of you over there at 92.1 WFOV, and we will welcome you back in 4 minutes. I want to thank you for staying tuned up at this point. We'll see you on the other side of the break. But let's look at what is happening here. And well, anyway, that's, Obama, clearly was not telling us the truth. We can keep whatever we had. If we can keep it, why are you taking it from us in terms of putting something else out there? That right there showed the manufactured lie he was telling. Because if you can keep it and keep your doctors, then why are they then taking the doctors and taking the insurance and then placing another insurance, a layer of insurance over it, and then telling us the cost is going to go down when government takes over the medical care, which is what they did, the medical care industry, which is 1/16 of the economy. 1/16. That's 8. Let's see. No, that's 1/6. Yeah, that's 16%. 1/6 of the economy was taken over by the government, which manufactures more of its power. It doesn't manufacture more of its money. What it does, by in fact enlarging its power base, it demands more of the money from the people who are paying money into the kitty of the government, and we're paying it by gunpoint. And you will see that in terms of what will be happening in another 2 months from now. And there's a certain date in which the demand will be made. I mean, it's not going to be any quid pro quo here. Quid pro quo is what they do. And then when Donald Trump does it, act like it's such an outrageous thing that he did, he was doing quid pro quo. Quid pro quo is what government does among other parts of its own system. That's how the system operates, through quid pro quo. But it doesn't operate in terms of quid pro quo, in terms of demand made upon the citizens. You do it or else. Because there's not a trade between the government and the citizens. What it is, there is a confiscation that's going on. And if you in fact object to it, they got a place for you to go to. And there are no couches in there. But I was impressed with the fact that right before coming to the studio, there was a report that came out that in Virginia, where Ralph Cramden and Norton, I meant Ralph Northam and the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. I mean, is there any difference between him and Ralph Cramden and Norton, or for that matter, Mud and Jeff? I mean, is there really a difference between them? Because most politicians are nothing but comedians. And what they're talking about is laughable. Most of what they talk about is a comedy routine. It would be laughable if it was not so injurious of the society that they are supposed to be operating on behalf of the society and so on and so forth. And they are the ones who we have given custodianship of the country, so they can then make sure that we have something that we leave for posterity. Because it does say in our Constitution, doesn't it? Do ordain the Constitution for ourselves and our posterity. So they are the custodians that making sure that we use the resources so that there's something that's able to be left for those who are coming behind us. So how good a job are they doing for that? Doing in that regard? Not a very good job. And they don't intend to do anything other than what they're doing. Okay, thank you, WFOV. We're now told that you're back, and we're very glad you're back. And when you are coming back after the 4-minute break, we always want to thank you for that, because we know you could go and do some other things with your time. And we respect your time, so that we are trying to be around the same area we were when you left for the commercial break on your part. I'm still talking about this. So if you ask the question, why did those legislative members change their mind? Let me give you 3 possible choices. You tell me which one you think it was. That they decided not to pass the gun ban on what they call assault weapons. Watch these adjectives now when they start putting adjectives on the words that don't need to have any adjectives onto it. Always watch that. Watch the modifiers, because the modifiers are always trying to tell you something. And that is to say they're trying to either lower the concern or raise the concern. When Bernie Sanders says democratic socialism, he's trying to lower the concern we should have for a system of government that hasn't worked anywhere in the world. Look 90 miles off the coast of Florida for the closest example to home in Cuba. And then if you want to look a little further away, go and look in Venezuela, or look anywhere.
I had relatives that lived in Hungary during the Soviet era, it was the communist era, and they lived under. Okay, they weren't brutally oppressed all the time. They didn't go into that, but
government's on vacation.
But they certainly suffered privation, and they were behind times, and everybody talks about we're not going to get the best. I don't think doctors, people who went 12, 13 years beyond their high school education era to go into college, to go to med school and all this and residency. Do you think they're going to come out and want to get paid civil service pay? No, $25,000, $30,000 a year? No, they're not going to want to do that. That's not the motivation for why they went into. I'm sorry, but if I was a young person going into medicine and I saw the possibility, I would go the other direction, and that's what they're doing now. Yeah, that's ridiculous.
John, they are going another direction. That's why we're going to have a problem down the line, because as government takes more and more control over the healthcare industry, what's going to happen is they want to manage the outlay, because there's only so much money coming in. And if you overtax, you got a rebellion on your hand. So they have to then limit the outlay, because they have to limit, not absolutely limit, but they have to be asking what will happen if they raise up to a certain level to which there's a rebellion, because the people cannot live because government is taking confiscating so much of their wealth. Then people will object to a contravention of their resources, to the point where they cannot pay their bills, they cannot live a quality life, they can't send their children to college, they can't do a lot of things. So they have to be worried about that. So what the government does is that it creates more extensive debt that have to be paid, but they have to manage it so that they're not having to make super demands, as if the demands are not already super, but they don't make super demands above the normal super demands they make, so as to lower the possibility that people will in fact object. Of course, the other thing they do, and I don't think people understand what they're saying to us when they are telling us that somebody's not paying their fair share. They never will define that, because there's no such thing as fair share. The fair share is zero. That's what the framers intended as far as federal government getting into taxation is concerned. Our Constitution did not allow the federal government to tax the pocketbook of the American people. It only allowed the states to do that, because we can call them into question, and we could move from that state and therefore deny the taxation that they were demanding. We found it prohibitive, and go to another state where that tax would not be allowed to be confiscated at all. So that would be a settlement point. But if you in fact have all the states having to have their taxes confiscated by government, the federal government in this case, then the only way you can exclude yourself from it is by leaving the country. And the framers understood that. That's why they put it in the Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3. Because they did not want to have this all-encompassing behemoth standing there as a monstrosity over the American people, extracting their wealth, and they made sure that that was not allowed. And when they did not have that, they intended what in the process? Limited government, because they don't have access to the purse strings. The ultimate way you actually limit government, although you do have the separation of powers, and you have the check and balance system, and you have the federal system that's in place where there are certain rights allocated to the federal government, and then certain rights that are not bequeathed to the federal government are retained by the states. The idea is limited government, and you limit it also by the purse strings. You don't have the money to begin to grow government, then that limits it. And that's what was intended by these brilliant framers in that room that was figuring out every angle of what had to go on here so they could, in fact, create a government which would not go out of existence lightly because of what has happened in the past with governments, because government will extinguish themselves by the kind of things that governments do. And all governments prior to that had extinguished themselves. Those governments that were setting themselves up as democracies, every last one of them had gone out of existence, and so the framers are trying to fix that. And they did, but you can't fix stupid. Which I hate to say this, I don't really hate to say it. I relish saying it. You can't fix these politicians. That's never going to be fixed. Because they don't run for office for the right reasons. They run for the wrong reasons. And there's a whole discussion we could have on that. But they did not pass the legislation in Virginia. Now let me ask you, I'm going to give you three possibilities. And you tell me which one you think was the reason why they backed down from passing this outrageous law, this bill, saying there's a bill to take away assault weapons. Now, I don't know if you are aware of the guns in your house. Not assaulting anybody. I'm a member of the NRA. And I would strongly suggest, as strongly as I can suggest, as a matter of fact, that this country arm itself. And that we, in fact, whenever they come out of the woodwork and talk about banning, you know how they do that parenthetical, assault weapons, that's Attila talking. Because all weapons are assault weapons, unless you, but not until you decide to use it to assault somebody. That doesn't even make it, that term, that modifier doesn't make any sense. What is it intended to do? It's intended to raise the concern so they can then move underneath the concern to go in there and enlarge upon their power. And the end result of it is to, in fact, get people to get used to the idea of them confiscating not your weapons, but confiscating that which you have to defend yourself. What we need in this country is more weapons. And you need it because we need to send a strong message to government in this country that we are armed just like you are. That's the message of that. And we're not armed because we go out, we're trying to hunt for some squirrels or going deer hunting. We can go to the store and get deer. In Denver, where I went to the convention in 2008. I went out there, and they had every kind of meat in their stores. I mean, they had buffalo. I mean, it was unbelievable. In the Midwest, if I can get chicken, I'm happy. They had buffalo. They had elk. I mean, every kind of meat you wanted, they had it. So I don't have to go hunting. I can go to the store. That's not why we have weapons. The bequeathal of the Second Amendment was for us to be able to bear arms in case we had to speak more powerfully to the government as it began to assume more power that did not, in fact, belong to it because it had not been bequeathed to it by Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, where there was a bequeathal to the federal government of the rights that was being bequeathed to them by the states, of which it is the creator of the federal government, and bequeathed to them certain rights for their sovereignty, which did not exist until it was given to them by the states. And that's why the states, in fact, bequeathed certain powers to them. The rest of the powers they were jealous of because they didn't feel government needed those rights in order to carry out its obligations, and the rest of those rights were retained by the states. And they want those rights from the states and therefore from the people. When the Constitution says that all the rights that are not bequeathed to the federal government by the states are retained, why do they say retained? Because that's where they were in the beginning. They were not delivered from their sovereignty to the sovereign government, to another sovereign entity that was different from itself. And so this bequeathal was limited and specific. I'm coming to a point I want to make later on about something else related to that, because I want to talk about some of these other people that are making some mistakes about the aftermath of the impeachment process, because I got to continue to talk about that because they have these professors still coming on these TV programs and continuing to muddy up the water about things they don't understand. And the latest one that did that was a person that I saw this weekend on a program that he did 2 weeks ago. I only got around to watching it last night. Dr. Randy Barnett from Georgetown University, who is one of the law school professors at Georgetown, and I knew ahead of time I was going to get my head bashing from his nonsense. We have to talk about that too. But this idea that you're going to confiscate assault weapons, that when you see government using modifiers, or some political leader using modifiers, always be aware that something is being hidden in the modification, because you don't have to modify language, because language can speak more directly than the adjective that in fact modifies the noun. When they have these modifiers, democratic socialism, somebody would ask Bernie Sanders. I think somebody did ask him, what is democratic socialism? I can guarantee you that he won't tell you what it is. Because democratic socialism is the same thing as socialism. Because you cannot democratize the state. Because the state does not vote upon what it does. The state is not a trade. See, the state does not involve itself in trade. The man of trade is the producer, not the government. The government is not an entity of trade. It is, and this is what George Washington was talking about. Government is an institution of force. In fact, Washington said government is force. And that's true. And the framers were, in fact, aware of that being the way government operates. And what they were trying to do was, on the one hand, to set it up because of what? For what Jefferson said in the Declaration of Independence, that governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And what that means is very clear. if it has powers that it does not derive to maintain what other powers? The powers that are not bequeathed to the government, the natural rights. That's not bequeathed to government. You can't give government your rights. We set government up, government's an institution among men, so as to protect the powers or the rights that we have that we would not have protected if the bully was in fact violating those rights. We set government up as an overarching power structure to in fact maintain our liberty, not to take our liberty from us. But in terms of the contradiction that is there in that, the framers recognized the contradiction. And what they did in that behalf is that they understood that they were in fact setting something up to stop the bully. But in terms of stopping the bully, what you were doing is setting up a legal arm of the bully. And you have to restrain that instrument as well. And that's what they tried to do. You're going to see the history of that and see that they were trying to work that out. And they did not do the best job at the very beginning. They did a much better job once they had gotten to a point of refinement of what they tried to do initially. And what they tried to do initially is not give the government any power. That's what the Articles of Confederation, all those 13 articles and Articles of Confederation, they were trying to keep power out of the hands of the federal government. That's what they were trying to do. But they found out that didn't work. So now we got to create a little bit more of King George III in our government structure, and they were they had to do that by giving it a little bit more power, but trying to figure out a way in which we could, in fact, do that, because of failings under the articles. But how do we give it more power and at the same time limit it so that it does not go out of control, which was the intention under the articles? And how do you in fact do that? And they got into that room and had to figure that out, and they figured it out. But you cannot figure out these politicians, because they will always do what politicians have always done, and they will never be different. They're not different here. Okay, so why do you think it was that they backed down in Virginia? I'll give you three choices. You tell me which one you think it was. They changed their mind, A, because they had read the Bible. Okay, that's A. B, because they had a newfound respect for the Constitution of the United States and the Second Amendment that says that the right to bear arms. Let me read it so that you won't think that this is not in there, and that they have not read this Second Amendment, the last part of it. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. There's no maybe in there. There's no I wish. The strongest language you can do, shall, in your Bible verse, thou shalt not. See, it's not like there's some negotiation going on here. Thou shalt not means that we're not negotiating this. This is absolute. And that's what we have in Amendment 2. The right of the people, government of the people, by the people, for the people. Didn't say right of the government of the government, for the government, and of the politicians. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be abridged. You can't be any clearer than that. Any abridgment That's what we're talking about in Virginia. So did they back down because of they got the Holy Ghost, and so the Bible somehow made them change their mind? It was a biblical mandate. They saw it in those terms. Or was it that they read the Constitution and had a newfound respect for it because it overlooked the Second Amendment's provisions, and now that they read it, they have now changed their heart? Or was it number three? In that gallery were people sitting up there that brought their weapons. They weren't cocked or anything, but brought them in there as a statement of what you're dealing with. You saw those weapons out there, and you saw them when they were out there in the street too. And you saw what else? You saw peace out there in the street, because the difference is that there was peace in that demonstration against what they were doing in that chamber that kept Antifa away. Because Antifa is a fascist group talking about they're anti. Antifa stands for supposedly anti-fascism. Whenever you have that anti-fascism, look out. Those modifiers have always got to be alarming, because there's also that's where Attila hides his hand. Anti-fascism, and they out there beating up people. You wear a MAGA hat around Antifa and see if you don't get your teeth knocked out. And they're anti-fascism, while in fact exporting the fascism from themselves and importing it to the space of people not doing anything other than peacefully assembling, and have the right to do so because they went to the authorities and got a permit to do it, and then the authorities back off and let Antifa attack these people. That's what happened. But they went to Richmond, and they went there in numbers with their weapons to let the people in that legislative body know what they're dealing with. And then when they were up there talking about it, they were looking in the gallery. They were in the gallery looking over the chamber meeting. And every day they met, they were up in that gallery looking over what they were doing to remember who they were. Not because they're going to go and harm them, but because they understood they're going to remember who they are and what they voted for when they come up for the only thing politicians are really worried about, and that is being turned out of power, because these people are power addicts. That's where they get off. And without that, they wouldn't have any identity, because they get their identity by willing power in the lives of other people. They get off by that. And that's why so many of them are so perverted, because if you have any kind of addiction, and you know this from your own, it leads to other addictions. So they're addicted to power. Then look at these other addictions they have. Look at Joe Biden, and look at look at him as just one example of it. The other thing that came out real quickly as we are running with time was another article came out today, and that was an article about Alexander Vindman. You remember when Vindman was talking about the phone call that was made between the President of the United States and the President Volodymyr Zelensky, the President of Ukraine. And he was quoted today as saying, and now they had a big headline, which I'll be writing about tomorrow on Facebook, because we have to talk about this in terms of the public domain. One of the persons that's here in Flint put it up on Facebook already, and I'll be writing about it tomorrow in my post. It'll be about 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. And it said that Vindman admits that he lied about the phone conversation between Trump and Zelensky. And I wrote back on this post, I said, who knew except those that had read the transcript of the conversation between the president and Zelensky, which I had read the transcript. And I knew that Dedman was lying, and I also knew this other guy who is absolutely insane, Adam Schiff, who should not be in the Congress, by the way. This man should be in Bellevue. This man is very sick. He's probably the sickest person in Congress. And that's saying a lot. Because there are a lot of people in Congress that are demented. And you just watch them in that dimension as they did not succeed, and they're not going to succeed. They know they can't succeed in removing the president because the president has a majority in the Senate. They know they cannot succeed in removing the president, and that's not what they're trying to do, because they know the Senate is not going to change his mind. They can't, because the president has 90 to 95% support in his own party. It's not these guys in the Senate have any better handle on their virtue of power. They don't. They just as wretched as the people are in the House, but the House has majority in another party and doesn't have to worry about the voters in their party because the president's in a different party. But the Republicans are not that. They have to worry about the same voters the president has to rely upon, and not going against them. So they're not trying to impeach to remove the president. They're trying to wound him. So there's cripple going in November. Okay, we got to get out of here again. I want to talk about Randy Barnett. I'll talk about it next week. We're not going to forget, and we will get to that next time. Until next time, I want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.